angelophanic, or related settings tied closely to God's activity. Chapter 5, Part 2. The Heavenly Host, Soldiers of the Most High. Ollian's choice of term, like brigades of angels, may strike some readers as odd. Second Temple vocabulary validates such a perspective. The names of angelic groups are often militaristic. A variety of combat terms are attributed to angels, clearly casting them as celestial warriors. For example, texts from Qumran refer to angels as troops, gedudim, warriors, giburim, and companies, brigades, degalim. Other scholars who focus on the angelology of the period have noted that angels are frequently cast in a militaristic role and that such portrayals are frequently part of apocalyptic literature. In his important study on angels as warriors in Second Temple Jewish literature, Michalak notes, "In the apocalyptic works of this time, the development of elaborated angelologies took place. One of the marks of the identification of apocalyptic literature is the idea that a seer is able to see the heavenly world together with its angelic inhabitants. Therefore, it is hardly surprising that in this literature a trend appears which makes a distinction between the various categories of angels and establishes their hierarchy. This feature of Second Temple angelology is consistent with, and in fact derives from, the portrayal of God's holy ones as a host, Tsabeot, led by a supernatural commander, Sar, prince. Note, as noted in our earlier discussion in Chapter 2, this Hebrew term is commonly used to describe human armies in the Hebrew Bible. Davidson adds, the participation of the angelic armies in this eschatological battle belongs to the traditions of the Holy War as it was conceived in Israel. End note. Several passages in the Old Testament describe an end-times conflict involving the army of the Holy Ones, unleashing the wrath of God on both his earthly and heavenly enemies. It is quite understandable, then, that Second Temple angelology includes this element of the heavenly host in service to God. The most obvious instance of supernatural armies in Second Temple literature comes from Qumran's War Scroll, a lengthy text envisioning human forces fighting side by side with angels against wicked men and supernatural powers of darkness. Michalak summarizes its contents. The major theme of the work is the eschatological war waged by the sons of light against the sons of darkness under the command of Belial. The main work consists of 19 columns from Qumran Cave 1. In Cave 4, 6 manuscript fragments have been found, all of which correspond to 1 QM. The War Scroll improves our knowledge of Jewish angelology. The already mentioned notion of human communion with angels is particularly noticeable in this work. Angels are brothers-in-arms of the sons of light in the holy war against the army of Belial. Note, Michalak lists the terms used to denote the angelic participants, including angels, Malachim, holy angels, Malachim Kodesh, gods, Elim, mighty ones, Giborim, holy ones, Kedushim, armies, hosts, Tsabeot. End note. Davison, author of another major study of Qumran angelology, adds, God's army consists of a multitude of holy ones, and hosts of angels in heaven, and the elect ones of the holy nation on earth. Both groups are to be mustered for the battle. The writer not only asserts that angels will be with them, but he also believes that God himself, the mighty one of war, will be too. The thought is similar to that in 1 QM 15, 13-14, where God raises his hand to act against the wicked spirits, and the angels gird themselves for battle. Angel armies are also found in the pseudepigrapha. The Watcher, archangels, are cast as guardians and special forces, charged by God with rounding up the fallen, rebellious Watchers and destroying their progeny, the giants. In the scene where God shows Enoch how he created all the forces of heaven and earth, God says, I created the ranks of the bodiless armies, 10 myriad angels, and their weapons are fiery, and their clothes are burning flames, and I gave orders that each should stand in his own rank. In a passage that echoes the eschatological judgment of the princes of the nations and their inhabitants, 1 Enoch 56-57, describes an angelic assault on the enemy nations. In those days the angels will assemble and thrust themselves to the east at the Parthians and Medes. They will shake up the kings, so that a spirit of unrest shall come upon them, and stir them up from their thrones. In those days Sheol shall open her mouth, and they shall be swallowed up into it, and perish. Thus Sheol shall swallow up the sinners in the presence of the elect ones. And it happened afterward that I had another vision of a whole array of chariots loaded with people, and they were advancing upon the air from the east and from the west until midday, and the sound of their chariots was clamorous. And when this commotion took place, the holy ones in heaven took notice of it, and the pillars of the earth were shaken from their foundations. 1 Enoch 56, 5, 8, and 57, 1-2a. Angelic warriors are also prominent in the Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, a work, as its title suggests, divisible into 12 separate works, each focused on one of the sons of Jacob. Note: the Testament genre concerns works that purport to be the final words, farewell discourses, of the figures whose name the title bears. Endnote. A solitary angel soldier appears on behalf of Judah, and at the request of Levi. Several scholars consider the angel in the latter instance to be Michael. An oblique reference to this same angel occurs in Testament of Daniel 6:1, a passage reminiscent of Jude 9. An army of angels is described in Testament of Levi 3:3. Other Second Temple literary works present angels as an attacking force. In 2 Maccabees 3:25-34, we read that God protected the temple treasury from the invading Heliodorus with supernatural warriors. But when Heliodorus arrived at the treasury with his bodyguard, then and there the sovereign of spirits and of all authority caused so great a manifestation that all who had been so bold as to accompany him were astounded by the power of God, and became faint with terror. For there appeared to them a magnificently caparisoned horse, with a rider of frightening mien. It rushed furiously at Heliodorus and struck him with its front hooves. Its rider was seen to have armor and weapons of gold. 2 young men also appeared to him, remarkably strong, gloriously beautiful, and splendidly dressed, who stood on either side of him, and flogged him continuously, inflicting many blows on him. The incident in 2 Maccabees 3 is not unique. There are similar episodes in 2 Maccabees 4:1-2, 5:2, 10:29-30, 11:6-8, and 15:22-23. The third book of Maccabees relates an angelic intervention, along with the holy face of God, against Ptolemy IV Polyphater. Note: Josephus downplays the activity of angels, and so does not mention any references to angels in his account of the Maccabean revolt. Endnote. Pseudo-Philo describes 2 named warrior angels who come to the assistance of Kenaz in his struggle against the Amorites. Michalak notes that Kenaz is depicted in a manner similar to the Israelite judges Samson and Gideon. Interestingly, angels appear in Pseudo-Philo's retelling of several of the stories in the Old Testament book of Judges. Note: Begg writes, Pseudo-Philo's mention of angels are particularly concentrated in the long segment that presents his often dramatically distinctive version of the personages and events recounted in the book of Judges. Endnote. The Divine Council, Scenes of Praise and Judgment. As with the case with the Old Testament theology of the heavenly host, angels in Second Temple literature appear in council with God, both to praise him and discharge his decrees. In the previous chapter, we noted the profound number of instances where the language of divine plurality, multiple Elohim or Elim, is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, often in scenes of the heavenly throne room, the place of Yahweh's council. Second Temple period literature does not downgrade the biblical idea of a divine council. It embraces it and adds a few innovations. The language of the divine council is most evident in Second Temple texts from Qumran and certain books of the pseudepigrapha. For example, the complex angelic liturgies found in the Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice contain important vocabulary of the Hebrew Bible for the meeting place of Israel's divine council. Note: There are roughly a dozen references to the council heights in the songs of the Sabbath sacrifice, none of which use the term malachim, angels, opting instead for plural Elohim or Elim. The Songs of the Sabbath Sacrifice is a liturgical document consisting of 13 distinct compositions, each dated to one of the first 13 Sabbaths of the year. Each song begins with a heading and date formula. For example, for the instructor, Song of the Sacrifice of the First Sabbath on the 4th of the first month. Following the heading comes a call to praise, introduced by the imperative praise, followed by a direct object, an epithet for God, and a vocative, an angelic title. The initial call to praise is expanded with one or more parallel calls to praise. Endnote. For example, one of the council scenes reads as follows: Of the instructor, Song of the Sacrifice of the 7th Sabbath on the 16th of the month. Praise the God of the heights, you exalted ones, among all the divinities of knowledge. May the holy ones of God magnify the King of glory, who makes holy with holiness all his holy ones. Chiefs of the praises of all the gods, praise the God of majestic praises, for in the magnificence of the praises is the glory of his kingdom. Through it come the praises of all gods, together with the splendor of all his majesty, and exalt his exaltation to the heights. Gods of the exalted divinities, and his glorious divinities above all the exalted heights. For he is the God of the gods, of all the chiefs of the heights, the King of kings of all the eternal councils. By the will of his knowledge, at the words of his mouth, all the exalted divinities exist. By what issues from his lips, all the eternal spirits, by the will of his knowledge, all his creatures in their enterprises. Sing with joy, those of you enjoying his knowledge, with rejoicing among the wonderful gods. The songs of the Sabbath sacrifice bear witness to an elaborate angelic hierarchy. The songs are characterized by repetitious formulas in which the number 7 figures prominently. The 6th and 8th songs enumerate the praises and blessings uttered by the 7 chief and deputy princes respectively. The central 7th song elaborates the initial call to praise into a series of 7 increasingly elaborate calls to praise addressed to each of the 7 angelic councils. After these calls to praise, the song then describes the heavenly temple itself bursting into praise, concluding with a description of the chariot throne of God, and the praise uttered by multiple attendant chariot thrones, merchabot, their cherubim and wheels, ophanim. The pseudepigrapha has similar scenes. The Apocalypse of Zephaniah, text A, describes Zephaniah's divine council vision in the 5th heaven. I saw angels who were called lords, and the diadem was set upon them in the Holy Spirit, and the throne of each of them was 7-fold more brilliant than the light of the sun. Reminiscent of the divine council scene in Daniel 7, 1 Enoch 47:3 has Enoch relating, I saw the chief of days when he seated himself upon the throne of his glory, and the books of the living were opened before him, and all his host which is in heaven above, and his council stood before him. 2 Enoch 20, verse 1, describes a council meeting of many-eyed thrones, with numerous archangels, dominions, and authorities. 2 Enoch has God seated in the 10th heaven, so it is clear that these lesser-ranking thrones are for divine council members. Portrayals of the heavenly host and the divine council in the pseudepigrapha are no less elaborate than those of Qumran. There are many terms besides the militaristic labeling noted above, and it is difficult to discern what the perceived hierarchical relationships were between the groups. For example, 1 Enoch 61:10 says, And he, God, will summon all the forces of the heavens, and all the holy ones above, and the forces of the Lord, the cherubim, seraphim, ophanim, all the angels of governance, the elect one, and the other forces on earth and over the water. Like others we have already considered, this one correlates members of the heavenly host to the throne presence of God and the elements of the natural world. Consequently, we presume that Second Temple Jewish angelology had distinct groups close to God's presence and others in charge of nature. In 2 Enoch 19, 1-5, Enoch describes a number of tasks for heavenly beings. And those men took me from there, and they carried me up to the 6th heaven, and I saw there 7 groups of angels, brilliant and very glorious, and their faces were more radiant than the radiance of the sun, and there was no difference between their faces, or in their dimensions, or in the style of their clothing. And these groups carry out and carefully study the movements of the stars, and the revolution of the sun, and the phases of the moon, and the well-being of the cosmos. And when they see any evil activity, they put the commandments and instructions in order, and the sweet choral singing and every kind of glorious praise. These are the archangels, who are over the angels, and they harmonize all existence, heavenly and earthly, and angels who are over seasons and years, and angels who are over rivers and the ocean, and angels who are over the fruits of the earth and over every kind of grass, and who give every kind of food to every kind of living thing, and angels who record all human souls and all their deeds and their lives before the face of the Lord. Here we learn that archangels are over angels, and they seem to be busily in charge of maintaining created order, plotting out times and seasons, and praising the Most High. Other angels record the lives of human beings, and, it seems, never depart from God's presence. There is, not surprisingly, much more we could investigate. It is clear that the heavenly bureaucracy of the Second Temple period is complex. Jewish texts from this period refer to angels of the presence, angels of sanctification, archangels, archons, rulers of the stars, satans, powers, principalities, and dominions. In 1 Enoch 6, 7-8, the label arche and archon are used interchangeably as titles for 20 named watchers. Speculative as it is, this material still generates logical questions. Are archangels too busy to participate in praising God? Are they so preoccupied with supervising lesser angels and running creation that they don't get much time in God's presence? 1 Enoch 40, 2-4, and 9-10 seems to clear up the matter, as the 4 angels, Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Phanuel, stand before the glory of the Lord, blessing the name of the Lord of spirits, saying praises before the Lord of glory. Note: Phanuel replaces Sariel Uriel in 1 Enoch 40:10. The names may have been understood as overlapping. 2 of the angelic voices in 1 Enoch 40 intercede and pray for humans and expel demons, forbidding them from coming to the Lord of the spirits in order to accuse those who dwell on the earth. The ensuing discussion will touch on these duties. Endnote. Regardless of the lack of hierarchical clarity, Second Temple Jewish angelology is not ambiguous when it comes to the divine council rendering and administering judgment. 1 Enoch 89-90, an allegory referred to as the animal apocalypse by scholars, contains a provocative divine council scene. The animal apocalypse is, as the name suggests, a vision of the end of days. Note: the animal apocalypse and other Jewish pseudepigraphal works bear an important relationship to Daniel 7-9, in that the end-time apocalypse is framed as the culmination of human history, divided into discrete periods determined by God. Endnote. Collins describes the content as a complex allegory in which people are represented by animals. Adam is a white bull, Cain and Abel are black and red bullocks. Israel are sheep. In the period after the exile, the sheep are given over to 70 shepherds, representing the angelic patrons of the nations. The 70 shepherds of 1 Enoch 89-90 are the fallen sons of God allotted to the Gentile nations at the Tower of Babel event. They are given charge over Israel as a punishment. The idea being conveyed in the allegory is that the chief shepherd, the Lord of the sheep of Israel, in other words, Yahweh, handed over the governance of his sheep, Israel, to the 70 angelic under-shepherds put over the nations at the Babel event. Israel is forsaken and would be governed by those lesser agents, in other words, would remain in exile until the end of days. The author of 1 Enoch 89-90 seems to be tracking on Jeremiah 25, transforming the human rulers who had conquered and abused Israel into angelic shepherds placed over Israel while in exile. Note: Davidson writes, "This scheme of the 70 angels who rule Israel for 70 periods from the Babylonian conquest till the advent of the eschaton creatively utilizes several Old Testament ideas. Genesis 10 gives the list of 70 nations descended from Noah, and Deuteronomy 32:8 appears to take this up, stating that an angel was assigned to each ethnic group. Israel, however, was different. Yahweh himself was caring for it. Jeremiah 25:17-38 has, no doubt, also influenced our author, for there the human leaders of the nations which have oppressed Israel are referred to as shepherds who will be punished by God." End note. In other words, the animal apocalypse frames Israel's apostasy and exile in supernatural terms. God commands these shepherds to slaughter his sheep, but they disobediently go beyond the parameters he had set. The severity of Israel's condition until the time of release is therefore the fault of the disobedient patron angels of the nations. This brings us to the divine council scene. The animal apocalypse combines the judgment of the fallen sons of God, the Watchers of Genesis 6:1-4, and that of the 70 disobedient sons of God who rule as princes over the nations. It is, in effect, the writer's imaginative enactment of the final verdict that the Elohim over the nations are sentenced to die like men. But the human inhabitants of the nations who oppressed Israel are also judged. As in Old Testament theology, the apocalyptic judgment of the day of the Lord is enacted in both the earthly and supernatural realms. Lopez writes, "As has been previously mentioned, Joel 3 is an earlier example of the connection of divine-human battle with the earthly judgment of all those who oppose Yahweh. Another parallel text is found in Isaiah 24:17-23. While the act of judgment is not mentioned directly as it is in Joel 3, the heavens and the earth are all punished. The implication of these texts, including Daniel 7, is that the judgment of the wicked cannot take place in the heavens. The divine council scene in 1 Enoch 90 further implies that it is not just the wicked of the earth that cannot enter the heavens. The heavenly beings who have disobeyed God are also forbidden entrance. After the books are open, judgment is carried out against 3 distinct groups: the fallen stars, the 70 shepherds, and the blind sheep. It should be noted that within this one judgment scene, separate traditions are maintained. First, there is the judgment of the Watchers, here called the fallen stars. They are mentioned here in the same order as the fall. First, the star that is identified with Asael, and then the remaining stars who followed. Here the fallen stars are placed alongside the 70 shepherds who did not fall from the heavens, in other words, openly reject God, but rather were appointed by God to rule over Israel. Their reason for punishment is not that they directly rejected God, but that they carried out God's punishment more severely than was ordered. The 2 groups of heavenly beings are judged separately and are sent to a place of condemnation and that abyss of fire. The place of punishment is somewhere at the ends of the earth, and the description of the place of punishment is in keeping with that found throughout 1 Enoch. Chapter 5